Welcome back to the McConnell Center series, Why You Should Read. If you haven't already, please subscribe and like this episode so that other people can find us. Today we have with us our friend in the McConnell Center, John D. Wilsey. John is a professor of church history and philosophy and chair of the Department of Church History at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He's author of a number of books, including God's Cold Warrior, The Life and Faith of John Foster Dulles, and was soon to be released, Religious Freedom, a Conservative Primer. Today he's here to talk about Edith Hamilton's classic, The Roman Way. So ladies and gentlemen, John Wilsey.
Thank you, sir. Well, hello, I'm John Wilsey, and it's great to be with you to spend some time talking about Edith Hamilton's book, The Roman Way, and thanks to my good friend Gary Gregg and the McConnell Center for this opportunity to spend some time with you talking about Edith Hamilton and talking about her writing. Edith Hamilton was a fascinating lady. She was born in 1867, and she died in 1963. She led a long and fruitful life as a classicist, as an educator, and as an author. She graduated from Bryn Mawr College in 1894, receiving her master's and bachelor's degrees from there. She was one of four daughters and one younger brother, and grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, from the age of 2 all the way through. After she finished up her work at Bryn Mawr College, she went to Germany intending to study for her PhD degree in classics. But she was persuaded to come back to the States to come on as headmistress of Bryn Mawr School, which was it continues to be a college prep school for girls. And it was the first college prep school for girls founded in America. She served as the headmistress of Bryn Mawr School from 1896 to 1922. And in that time, she retired. So she already had a long life as an educator. But she became an author after she retired. She wrote several books on the Greeks and on the Romans. She wrote a couple of books on the Hebrew prophets. She wrote a book on early Christianity. And she even wrote a book on mythology, which was her best-selling book. She wrote, for example, her first book was The Greek Way, which she wrote in 1930. She wrote The Roman Way. This is my old copy from 1960 edition. That was my grandfather's copy. She wrote that in 1932. She wrote The Prophets of Israel in 1936. Mythology came out in 1942. And then she produced also a volume containing the collected works of Plato in 1961, just a couple of years before she died. She also was those are just a few of her works. She also translated some of the plays. She translated the works of Aeschylus and Sophocles and Euripides. She was a fascinating person. She was made an honorary citizen of the city of Athens in 1957 when she was 90 years old. Now, why should you read this book, The Roman Way? I have 3 reasons why you should read The Roman Way, and I have another video on the Greek Way that I recommend that you take a look at. I recommend that you read the Greek Way as well, and I had 3 reasons why you should read the Greek Way. And in the same way that I said for the Greek Way, there's probably a lot of reasons why you should read the Roman Way, just as there are many reasons why you should read the Greek Way. It's a classic text, and Edith Hamilton was a popularizer. She was not a scholar. She always said that she was not a scholar. What her goal was to bring Greek and Roman culture, Roman and Greek art and literature, language, their thought, the way that they saw reality. She wanted to make those things accessible to a broad audience. So you should pick up The Roman Way, and I have 3 reasons why you should read it. The first is that Hamilton gives us insight into what healthy patriotism consists of through her analysis of the great orator Cicero. Now, in our day, patriotism is sort of a contested idea with people arguing about Christian nationalism and things of that nature. But nevertheless, healthy love of country is a good and necessary thing for, especially for a republic. And in her treatment of Cicero, she bears that out. She said that in the republic, politics was both honorable and obligatory. It's common for us to think about politics as a dirty business. But the Romans saw politics not as a dirty business, as an honorable calling, and as obligatory for citizens. And I think that that's a good lesson for Americans today. Here's a quote from The Roman Way. Hamilton said, "A good man, a great man." Both terms were synonymous with a patriotic man. Goodness, apart from patriotism, did not exist for the Roman. I think that's a real strong statement, a real healthy statement for us to consider. Because in our day, patriotism is considered at times rather corny, and at other times even harmful. But for Cicero, and as Hamilton presents Cicero to us, it was seen as an expression of a rightly ordered love for one's own. Now, the second reason I think you should read The Roman Way is that because Rome was, in the final analysis, a people given to war, the Romans give us a unique perspective on the value of practical virtues. Now, people are fascinated, I think, with Rome because they were a conquering people. They, of course, conquered the entire Mediterranean world, from Britain all the way to the Euphrates River, from France all the way down to Egypt. The Romans had conquered all those lands and all those peoples in the course of its republican and imperial career. And Rome lasted for many centuries. The traditional founding of Rome was 753 BC. In the West, it collapsed by 476 AD. And in the East, the Roman Empire took on another form in the Byzantine Empire, which lasted until 1453. So Rome has an existence, a political existence for centuries, millennia. And when Rome fell, it didn't just go away. It bequeathed to us its legal tradition, most importantly, and also its language. But what we know about the Romans was that they were a warlike people. And so in America of the 21st century, that's considered to be something something not to admire. We don't consider war in the same way that the Romans did thousands of years ago. The Romans saw war as glorious and noble, and we have learned in modern war that that's not the experience of war today. That's not the attitude that people take of war. But what Rome teaches us is how to stress the practical as a result of their having been a warlike people. They were disciplined, for example. Discipline and order were central to the Roman mind and the Roman way of life. The need for order, dictated and sort of guarded by just law, was something that began with the private individual. So if you were going to have just law, and if you were going to have an orderly society, it had to begin with the individual person ordering their own life in the same way, with virtue, with the 4 cardinal virtues that Cicero wrote about in his book on moral duties: temperance, courage, wisdom, and justice. These things order the private life, the individual life. And when you have citizens that order their lives according to the virtues, then just law and just order will result in society. But it takes discipline. It takes self-sacrifice. It takes self-restraint to do those things. And the Romans they placed great value in discipline. Edith Hamilton said this: "The little town on 7 hills conquered the other little towns around her because her citizens could obey orders." Now again, to contrast a little bit with today, the idea of simply obeying orders might remind modern readers with the Nuremberg trials after World War II, where the German defense, the officers' defense, the SS officers, they would say, "I was just following orders," and that, of course, is not a justification for doing immoral and unjust and oppressive things. However, on the positive end of the spectrum, following orders is necessary. We have to obey authority in life, in ordinary ways, in small ways, and in big ways. When we follow orders, and those orders are just, and society is ordered by justice, then we can have human flourishing. Now, there's an irony here. A people so warlike, with a lust for blood, not just on the battlefield, but also in the arena, with a lust for destruction, also bequeaths to the world a law code established on the concept of equal justice. Equal justice under law. The idea that a man should be assumed innocent until proven guilty began in Rome. Now, while Greek thought was often abstract, Roman thought was made up of the concrete, the tangible. And one of the ways that they exhibited this was through their storytelling. Whereas the Greeks had philosophy, the Greeks had speculation, the Greeks had mythology, the Romans told stories. They told stories about heroes in their past and in their history, patriots in their history who gave of themselves and sacrificed themselves for the safety and security of Rome. Those were concrete examples of virtues in application in real time for the benefit of citizens. So they were concrete. They were stories that people could relate to. Like the story of Regulus, who was captured by the Carthaginians. And he was a prisoner of the Carthaginians. And he was sent back to Rome to give a message from Carthage to Rome. And he was told that he needed to come back and submit himself again as a prisoner. And he promised that he would. He gave his word that he would take the message and that he would come back, submit himself again as a prisoner, and submit himself to torture and to death. And of course, he fulfilled his word. He went back to Rome, gave the message of the Carthaginians, and then he returned to Carthage as its prisoner and was tortured and killed. This was an example, a concrete example, of the importance of keeping your word, the importance of personal integrity, the importance of self-sacrifice for love of your country and for your own. Edith Hamilton said, "High honors and love of country that made nothing of torture and death was what the Romans set first as the greatest thing of all." Their sheer willpower, their enduring effort, their courage in the face of opposition, their perseverance, no matter how often or how disastrous failure came, these were the distinctions of the Roman way. Now lastly, the last reason I would say that we should read the Roman way is that Hamilton draws lessons from the history of Rome for our own consideration today. After the vast extent of Roman victories in building a civilization. The Romans were unable to work together in the end, in unity, to preserve and extend their gains. Now, the Roman Empire, of course, lasted a really, really long time, but ultimately the Roman Empire disintegrated because the Roman citizens turned inward. They turned to their own selfish ambitions and their own selfish desires. They were unable to see that the good of the individual was necessarily bound up with the good of the whole, and that the good of the whole was inexorably tied to the good of the individual. That if society is going to flourish, there has to be that balance. There has to be that balance between private interests and public interests, between the interests and the desires of the individual citizen and the interests and desires of the community. Hamilton said, "A narrow selfishness kept men blind when their own self-preservation demanded a worldwide outlook." It reminds me of something that Alexis de Tocqueville observed in Democracy in America after he traveled through the United States in 1831 and 32. That Americans had found balance between the needs of the individual and the needs of the community through cultivation of mores and customs that were predicated on ethics, through voluntary associations on the local level, through self-interest rightly understood, and through freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Americans had balanced those things out, which preserved liberty in a democracy. And we Americans of today can look back to Rome as a negative example in many ways. But there are a lot of positive examples that we can see as well. History is a guide to us. And Hamilton said it this way: "We are like youth that can never learn from age. But youth is young, and wisdom is for the mature. We that are grown should not find it impossible to learn from the age's old recorded experience of the past." History is our great teacher. All knowledge is historical knowledge. Everything that we know, we gained in the past. When we look to the past, we get wisdom from the past. And this is probably the best benefit that we get from reading Edith Hamilton. Hamilton demonstrates through her consideration of the Roman way that good historical thinking produces a fully formed and mature conscience, and that alone is worth the price of the book. Thank you.